Security was already moving toward Isaiah Bennett when Lauren Whitmore's father pointed at the gift table and said, "That man is taking something that doesn't belong to him." The ballroom went quiet fast. Too fast. Caleb Bennett, still in his wedding tuxedo, turned just in time to see his father standing beneath a gold chandelier with an old metal toolbox in one hand, a navy-wrapped gift in the other, and every polished face in the room deciding what kind of man he was before he could speak. Isaiah did not raise his voice. He did not drop the toolbox. He only looked at his son, then at the security guard, and said, "I'm not here to take from my boy. I'm here to leave him something that lasts." Rebecca Bennett heard the words from across the ballroom. She stood near the floral arch in a fitted navy dress, blonde hair pinned cleanly above her shoulders, one hand resting over the phone that kept vibrating in her clutch. 12 years divorced from Isaiah had taught her how to look at him without looking too long. Calm, distant, controlled, but something about the toolbox made her breath slow. Scratched into its side, almost hidden beneath rust and rainwater, were the faded letters of St. Mary's Oncology Center. 3 hours earlier, Isaiah had been in a downtown maintenance warehouse, tightening a broken dock latch while younger men joked about rich weddings and divorced parents. He was 52, a quiet black single father with tired eyes, careful hands, and a way of taking disrespect like weather. It passed over him. It did not enter him. His phone buzzed beside a cold cup of black coffee. Caleb's message was simple. "You still coming early, Dad? Need help setting up." Isaiah smiled at the screen longer than he meant to. "Wouldn't miss it, son." In the same pocket as his phone sat a folded hospital receipt, soft at the edges from years of being touched and hidden. He checked it once, not because he needed the numbers, but because some burdens became easier to carry when folded small. Then he tucked it away and finished his shift. No one at the warehouse knew why he had taken overtime for so many years. No one knew why his old truck had been sold, bought back, and patched together with parts from junkyards. Isaiah preferred it that way. A father did not make a stage out of sacrifice. By late afternoon, he stood in his small apartment ironing the charcoal suit he had worn to Caleb's graduation. The cuffs were frayed. The shoulders still fit. On the kitchen table, the wedding gift sat beside the old toolbox, the one Caleb had once filled with crayons, plastic dinosaurs, and school drawings while Isaiah repaired pipes at night. Isaiah ran a thumb over a dent near the handle. Caleb had made that dent at 7 years old, trying to help. The memory warmed him, then hurt a little. At the venue, luxury cars curved around the lakefront entrance while rain tapped against black glass and marble. Isaiah parked near the catering vans. Habit. He carried the toolbox himself because the lock was weak and the gift inside mattered more than its wrapping. In the lobby, guests glanced at his worn dress, shoes, then away. A woman near the champagne tower whispered, "That's Caleb's father?" Isaiah heard it. He always heard it. Still, when a young server struggled with a stack of chairs, he set the gift down and helped without being asked. That was when the toolbox slid from beneath the gift table. Isaiah reached for it before it could strike the marble. Lauren's father saw only a black man bending near wedding envelopes. The accusation came sharp enough to cut through music. Now the whole ballroom watched. Caleb stepped forward, confused and embarrassed. Rebecca did not move. Her face remained composed, but her eyes were locked on that faded hospital logo as if the past had reached through the floor and touched her ankle. Isaiah slowly placed the toolbox on the table. Rain darkened one shoulder of his suit. The security guard waited for an argument. The wealthy guests waited for shame. Isaiah gave them neither. He opened his palm, showing the old truck key, the Navy gift tag, and nothing stolen. "Ask my son before you judge his father," he said quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. Lauren reached for his hand. And then, as Isaiah lifted the toolbox to move it away from the envelopes, a thin folded paper slipped from the loose lid and landed at Rebecca's feet. She looked down. The print was faded, but her own name was still clear enough to read beneath the hospital letterhead. Rebecca Bennett bent slowly and picked up the folded paper before Isaiah could stop her. Security still stood close enough to touch his sleeve. Lauren Whitmore's father still watched him like a mistake that needed removing from the room. And Caleb, caught between his bride's family and the man who raised him, looked as if someone had placed a weight across his chest. The receipt trembled once in Rebecca's hand. St. Mary's Oncology Center. Her name. A payment line faded almost white at the edge. Not enough to explain everything, just enough to make the room tilt. "Why do you have this?" she asked. Isaiah's eyes lowered for half a second. Not shame. Calculation. The old instinct of man deciding how much truth would protect people and how much would hurt them. "Old paperwork," he said quietly. Lauren's father gave a dry breath. "Old paperwork does not explain why you were reaching near the wedding envelopes." The words landed hard. A few guests looked toward the gift table. Phones lowered. Whispers sharpened. Caleb stepped forward, but Isaiah lifted one hand gently, stopping him without touching him. A father's warning. "Not now. Not like this." The security guard cleared his throat. "Sir, we may need to check the box." Isaiah looked at the toolbox, then at the navy-wrapped gift beside it. The old metal handle had left a faint rust mark on the white linen. He hated that more than the accusation. "You can check it," he said, calm enough to make the silence deeper. "But you will do it on the table, not on the floor." The guard paused, surprised by the boundary. Isaiah did not move. He was not angry. He was not pleading. He simply stood there in his worn charcoal suit with reins still dark on one shoulder, refusing to be handled like evidence. Rebecca noticed that. She also noticed the way Caleb's face changed when his father spoke. Pride fighting embarrassment. Love fighting public pressure. The toolbox clicked open under the guard's hand. Inside were no envelopes. No ULD. No cash. Just folded receipts, an old truck key, a hospital bracelet sealed in a plastic sleeve, a small photo with the edges worn soft, and Caleb's childhood drawing of 3 stick figures standing beside a black truck. The drawing had been folded so many times the paper had split near the sun. Caleb went still. "Dad?" he whispered, but Isaiah looked away first. Lauren's father's expression tightened, not apologetic yet, only uncomfortable that the scene had not confirmed his suspicion. Rebecca stared at the hospital bracelet. Her hospital bracelet. The one she thought nurses threw away 12 years ago after the last treatment cycle nearly broke her. Isaiah reached for the toolbox lid, careful and slow. "My son has a wedding to enjoy," he said. "This does not need to become entertainment. If you have ever watched someone stay calm while the room misunderstood them, remember that kind of strength. Comment where you are watching from, and subscribe to follow what Caleb is about to discover." The sentence was not spoken in the ballroom, but it lived in the silence around Isaiah as he closed the lid. Rebecca did not defend him. Not yet. She was still too guarded, too trained by years of disappointment to trust one receipt and a familiar name. But she did not let the security guard take the box away either. Her fingers remained wrapped around the faded paper. "Caleb," Lauren called softly from near the stage. "They need your vows." Caleb blinked, pulled back into the wedding. "They're in Dad's truck," he said, voice rough. Isaiah reached into his pocket and handed him the old black truck key without a question. Glove compartment. Caleb took it, but his eyes stayed on the toolbox, on the bracelet, on the drawing. Then he walked toward the lobby faster than he needed to. Isaiah watched him go, calm on the outside, but his hand tightened once against the tablecloth when he noticed one corner of the toolbox had not latched fully. A second receipt sat half visible inside, marked with Rebecca's name and a date Caleb was old enough to remember. Caleb Bennett did not see the second receipt fall loose from the toolbox. He was already pushing through the ballroom doors with his father's old truck, key pressed into his palm, trying to breathe past the heat in his face. Behind him, music started again, too politely, the kind of soft wedding music meant to cover discomfort. Ahead of him, the underground garage waited cold and gray beneath the venue, smelling of rainwater, concrete, and expensive engines. His polished shoes clicked across the wet floor between rows of black SUVs and luxury sedans until he reached the one vehicle that looked like it had survived a different century. Isaiah's old black truck sat near the back wall beside the service elevator. Faded paint, rust near the wheel wells, a cracked leather seat Caleb knew better than his own childhood bedroom. For a moment, He stood outside it with the key in his hand and remembered being 8 years old in that passenger seat, holding a lunchbox on his knees while his father drove him to school after a night shift. Isaiah would smell like motor oil and black coffee. He would ask about spelling tests, permission slips, science projects, all while fighting sleep at red lights. Caleb used to think that was just how fathers were. Tired, quiet, always leaving early, always coming home late. He unlocked the truck and leaned inside. The glove compartment stuck at first, same as always. Isaiah had once promised to fix it, then laughed softly and said, "Some things still work even when they make noise." Caleb found his folded vows tucked beside an old registration card and a pair of work gloves. He should have taken them and gone back upstairs. Instead, a thick folder slid forward when his hand brushed the papers underneath. St. Mary's Oncology Center. Caleb went still. The hospital logo looked too familiar now, too close to the one on the receipt his mother had picked up in the ballroom. He opened the folder just enough to see payment confirmations clipped in careful rows. Dates highlighted in blue ink. Billing department stamps. His mother's name printed again and again. Then his father's name underneath each authorization. Isaiah Bennett. Caleb's throat tightened before he understood why. He turned one page, then another. Not enough to make sense of everything. Too much to ignore. A smaller note had been folded between two statements, written by someone in hospital billing. "Mr. Bennett, we understand continuing payments may be difficult. Please contact us if you need to pause the arrangement." Caleb sat down slowly in the driver's seat, the vows forgotten in his lap. The garage lights hummed above him. Rain tapped somewhere near the ramp. Suddenly, pieces of his childhood began moving inside him like furniture dragged across a dark room. The winter Isaiah said the heat was good enough while sleeping in a hoodie on the couch. The year Christmas gifts got smaller, but his mother's medicine kept arriving. The boat Grandpa left behind, gone one summer with Isaiah, calling it old junk while never looking Caleb in the eye. Caleb pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth. His father had not been distant. He had been stretched thin enough to disappear. A text from Lauren lit his phone. "They're asking for you. Are you okay?" Caleb could not answer yet. He reached to put the folder back exactly where it belonged. Careful, because privacy was one of the few things Isaiah still owned. Then he saw a photograph tucked behind the final divider. Isaiah and Rebecca outside St. Mary's years ago, her face pale beneath a knitted hat, his hand holding an umbrella over both of them. On the back, in Isaiah's steady handwriting, were 7 words Caleb had never heard him say aloud. "As long as she fights, I fight." Caleb stared at the sentence until the garage blurred. Upstairs, his wedding reception waited for vows, speeches, and smiles. Downstairs, inside an old truck that everyone else had underestimated, Caleb Bennett had just found the first proof that his father's silence had never meant absence. Caleb returned from the garage with his vows in one hand and the hospital folder pressed flat against his ribs like he was hiding an injury. He stopped just outside the ballroom doors when he saw Isaiah being guided toward a narrow side corridor by the venue director and the same security guard. Rebecca followed several steps behind them, still holding the faded receipt, her face composed in the way people looked when composure was the only wall they had left. "We just need a private word," the venue director said, smiling too hard. For everyone's comfort, Isaiah understood that kind of sentence. It sounded polite. It meant leave before the rich people feel uneasy. He glanced back toward the ballroom, where Lauren stood under the soft chandelier light, waiting for her groom, waiting for a ceremony no father should damage with old pain. Isaiah gave Caleb one small look through the glass doors. "Stay steady." Then he walked into the side corridor without arguing. The hall smelled of lilies, floor polish, and rain trapped in wool coats. A catering cart blocked part of the walkway, silver trays stacked too high beside a young server whose hands shook as she tried to move them. One wool had caught in the carpet seam. Champagne glasses tilted. The venue director snapped, "Not now." Isaiah stepped past him anyway. He set the toolbox down, caught the top tray before it slipped, and eased the cart free with one controlled lift. No announcement, no performance, just a man seeing trouble and removing it before it became someone else's humiliation. The server whispered, "Thank you." Isaiah only nodded. "Keep your wrist under the weight, not behind it." Rebecca watched from 3 feet away, the receipt softening in her grip. The action was small, too small for drama. That was why it bothered her. He had just been accused in front of her son's new family, and still he had helped the first person weaker than himself in the hallway. The venue director cleared his throat, annoyed that kindness had interrupted authority. "Mr. Bennett, we need to know why medical documents connected to Mrs. Bennett are in your possession." Isaiah looked at Rebecca then. Really looked, not with bitterness, not with longing, with the tired caution of a man standing near a door he had kept locked for years. "Because some things were easier to carry than explain," he said. Rebecca's jaw tightened. "That is not an answer. It is the only one that protects the wedding." The word struck harder than if he had raised his voice. Rebecca was used to men defending themselves. She was used to excuses, negotiations, polished lies, and expensive rooms. Isaiah gave her none. The security guard opened the toolbox again, slower this time. The hospital bracelet rested on top of Caleb's old drawing, and beneath it, the corner of another receipt showed a payment date from years ago. Rebecca reached toward it, but Isaiah's hand came down gently on the lid. Not forceful, final. "Not in a hallway," he said. The boundary made the director stiffen. It made Rebecca go silent. From the doorway, Caleb saw the gesture, saw the folder in his own hand, saw his mother holding one receipt while his father protected the rest like they were not papers but people. Then Lauren's voice floated from behind him, soft and confused. "Caleb, why does that folder have your mom's hospital name on it?" Rebecca turned. Isaiah closed his eyes for one breath. Caleb stepped into the corridor, lifted the folder, and asked the question no one in that hallway was ready to hear. "Dad, why is your signature on every payment?" The question stayed in the corridor longer than the music from the ballroom. Caleb stood with the hospital folder raised in one hand, his tuxedo sleeve pulled tight across his wrist, his face no longer embarrassed but wounded. "Dad," he said again, lower this time, "why is your signature on every payment?" Isaiah looked at the folder, then at Rebecca, then past them toward the open ballroom doors where 200 guests waited beneath chandeliers for a wedding to continue. He could have answered. He could have let every receipt speak for him. He could have pointed to the years of overtime, the sold truck, the missed dinners, the birthdays when he gave Caleb less so his mother could stay alive. Instead, Isaiah took one slow breath and reached for the vows in Caleb's other hand. "Because today is not about that," he said. Caleb did not move. "Is if you paid Mom's hospital bills." Rebecca's fingers tightened around the faded receipt. Her face remained controlled, but the color had left her cheeks. Lauren's father stepped closer, his voice low and polished with suspicion. "This is highly inappropriate. If money was exchanged, if there was some arrangement, perhaps it should be discussed after the ceremony." The word arrangement made Isaiah's eyes lift. Not sharp, not angry, just awake. "There was no arrangement," he said. "There was a sick woman. There was a boy who needed his mother. That was all." The corridor went silent. Rebecca blinked once, hard, as if the sentence had struck a place she kept locked even from herself. But Isaiah did not look at her long enough to ask for recognition. He turned back to Caleb and pressed the vows gently into his son's hand. "Go marry the woman you love." Caleb's throat worked. "You're asking me to walk away from this?" "I'm asking you not to let pain steal from joy." It was the kind of sentence that should have sounded like a lesson. From Isaiah, it sounded like a man holding a door shut with his shoulder. The venue director shifted impatiently. A tray crashed somewhere near the service entrance. Glass shattered across marble. A young server froze beside the fallen silverware, her face folding with panic as champagne ran in thin gold lines toward Rebecca's hem. The director snapped her name, embarrassed by the mess in front of important people. Before anyone else moved, Isaiah bent down. His bad knee touched the cold floor. He took the white linen napkin from his pocket, wrapped the largest shards carefully, and pushed the broken glass away from the server's shaking hands. "Don't use your fingers," he said quietly. "Use the towel. Slow is safe." The girl whispered that she was sorry, over and over, as if sorry could hold her job together. Isaiah glanced at the director. It was the wheel on the cart, he said. Caught in the seam. Not her. He had no reason to protect her. No one in that corridor would reward him for it. In fact, the delay only made him look more like the problem everyone wanted removed. Still, he stayed crouched until the last piece of glass was gathered and the young server's breathing steadied. A small red line opened across Isaiah's thumb where one shard had slipped through the napkin. He tucked the hand behind his back before Caleb could see. Rebecca saw it anyway. She saw the blood. She saw the toolbox beside his worn shoe, the hospital bracelet inside it, the child's drawing folded beneath years of receipts. She saw a man publicly accused, privately cornered, and still careful with someone else's fear. Something in her expression changed. Not trust, not apology, not yet, but the certainty she had carried for 12 years cracked at the edge. Isaiah stood, lifted the toolbox, and gave the venue director a calm nod. I'll wait outside until the vows are done. Caleb stared at him. You'll miss it. Isaiah's eyes softened for the first time that night. No, son. I'll hear you from the doorway. He started toward the service exit, choosing absence over spectacle, dignity over vindication. Behind him, Rebecca looked down at the receipt again and noticed a handwritten note in the corner she had missed before. Paid during patient hardship. Do not disclose at payer's request. Rebecca Bennett did not follow Isaiah outside. Not at first. She stood in the side corridor with the receipt in her hand while the wedding music swelled again beyond the doors, gentle and rehearsed, as if beauty could cover what people refused to name. Caleb was being pulled back toward the altar. Lauren's father was speaking in a low voice to the venue director, already trying to turn discomfort into procedure. Rebecca heard none of it clearly. Her eyes stayed on the handwritten note in the corner of the receipt. Do not disclose at payer's request. For years, she had believed St. Mary's had quietly reduced her balance through a hardship program. She remembered signing forms with trembling hands, too proud to call Isaiah, too angry to let him see how thin her wrists had become beneath hospital blankets. She remembered telling herself he had moved on because that was easier than wondering why he never asked enough questions. Her phone vibrated inside her clutch. A board member from the Charity Foundation, then her assistant, then a reminder about a donor call scheduled for Monday morning. The life she had rebuilt kept reaching for her, polished and demanding, but her hand would not move toward the screen. She stepped into the small bridal lounge beside the corridor and closed the door halfway. The room was warm, full of perfume, white roses, champagne flutes, and mirrors framed in gold. Her reflection looked perfect. That almost offended her. Rebecca placed the receipt on the vanity as if it might break. Then she unfolded the second paper from the toolbox, the one Isaiah had tried to keep inside. Another payment, another date, 3 months after her first surgery, 6 months later, then a year after the divorce papers were final. Each line carried his name with the same quiet handwriting. Outside the lounge, Isaiah stood near the service exit with the toolbox at his feet, listening to Caleb's vows through a cracked ballroom door. His thumb was wrapped in a napkin already turning pink at the edge. He did not push closer. He did not ask for a seat. He only stood where he would not embarrass his son and bowed his head when Caleb's voice shook on the first promise. A server passed him with fresh glasses and whispered, Your hand, sir. Isaiah tucked it deeper into his pocket. It'll wait. In the lounge, Rebecca sat down slowly. The chair creaked beneath a woman who had spent years refusing to collapse in rooms built for sympathy. She touched the hospital bracelet sealed in plastic. Her own name, her own wrist, her own fear, preserved by the man she had trained herself not to need. Why would you hide this? She whispered. But the question sounded less like anger now and more like something afraid of the answer. The door opened an inch. Caleb stood there, vows folded in one hand, his eyes wet but steady. He looked past her to the receipt on the vanity, then to the old child's drawing beside it. 3 stick figures, a black truck, a yellow sun. On the back, in crooked 7-year-old letters, was a sentence Rebecca had never seen. Dad says we don't let Mom fight dragons alone. Caleb did not step fully into the bridal lounge. He stayed in the doorway with the careful posture of a groom trying not to become a child again in front of his mother. The drawing shook slightly in Rebecca's hand. 3 stick figures. A black truck. A yellow sun too large for the paper. Dad says we don't let Mom fight dragons alone. Rebecca read the sentence twice, then a third time, because the first 2 times her mind refused to let it belong to Isaiah. I drew that, Caleb asked quietly. You were 7, Rebecca said, though she barely remembered the year. She remembered painkillers, hospital sheets, a plastic cup of ice chips, her own pride sitting beside the bed like a second illness. Caleb looked at the receipts on the vanity, the hospital bracelet, the folded note from billing. He never told me, he said. He let me think he was just working all the time. Rebecca's face tightened. He let me think other things too. The sentence came out sharper than she intended, a reflex from the old life where anger had kept her standing. Caleb did not flinch. That was Isaiah in him. The quiet steadiness. The refusal to meet pain with more pain. Mom, he said, maybe he wasn't trying to make you think anything. The room fell still. Outside, applause rose from the ballroom as if another couple, another family, another life had found its rhythm without them. Rebecca folded the drawing carefully, slower than necessary, and walked toward the service exit. Caleb followed, but stopped when Lauren touched his arm from the hallway. Her eyes moved from the folder to his face. She did not ask a question. She only took the vows from his hand and held them for him, as if love sometimes meant carrying the paper while someone else carried the truth. Isaiah was still near the cracked ballroom door. He stood half in shadow, toolbox at his feet, thumb wrapped in a stained napkin, listening as the officiant tried to keep the ceremony moving. He looked up when Rebecca approached, not hopeful, not afraid, simply ready for whatever dignity would cost him next. She held out the child's drawing. Caleb found this. Isaiah's eyes softened before he could stop them. He took the paper with a hand that was not bleeding. For a moment, the years between them folded smaller than the creases in that page. He was proud of that son, Isaiah said. Said it had to be big enough to cover everybody. Rebecca watched his thumb rest beneath the crooked sentence. A wealthy woman in diamonds, surrounded by roses and marble, found herself unable to speak to a maintenance man holding a child's drawing like it was a sacred document. Caleb stepped closer. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Isaiah looked at his son. Because children should not have to keep score of their parents' sacrifices. Caleb's eyes filled, but Isaiah placed the drawing back into his hand before the moment could become too public. You have vows waiting. Rebecca heard the boundary. She also heard the love inside it. Before she could answer, Lauren's father appeared at the end of the corridor, his phone raised just low enough to pretend it was not recording. His gaze dropped to the receipts, then to Isaiah's toolbox, then to Caleb standing between both parents. This needs to be handled, he said coldly, before it becomes a spectacle. On his screen, the video had already started. Lauren's father did not shout. That made it worse. He stood at the end of the corridor with his phone angled just low enough to look casual, recording Isaiah with the toolbox at his feet, Caleb holding hospital papers, and Rebecca standing between them with a face too pale for candlelight. I think everyone deserves clarity, he said, especially before my daughter joins this family. Isaiah looked at the phone first, then at Lauren, who had gone still beside Caleb with the vows pressed to her chest. He knew what a camera could do when it entered a story late. It did not capture the first insult. It did not capture the server's shaking hands, the broken glass, the receipt at Rebecca's feet, or the years folded inside that old metal box. It captured a black man in a service hallway holding private documents while wealthy people waited for an explanation. The venue director stepped closer, voice tight. Mr. Bennett, maybe it would be best if you left the premises until the ceremony concludes. Caleb's head snapped toward him. What? Rebecca opened her mouth, but no sound came. She was still measuring the room, the video, the names, the old receipts, the public shape of a private truth. Her silence lasted 1 second too long. Isaiah felt it. So did Caleb. Lauren's father used the pause like permission. This is not punishment. It is simply damage control. The words settled coldly over the hallway. Damage. Control. Isaiah picked up the toolbox slowly, careful not to let the latch swing open again. The child's drawing was back inside now, beside the hospital bracelet, beneath papers that had suddenly become evidence instead of sacrifice. My son will not start his marriage with people arguing over me, Isaiah said. I can step outside. Caleb moved in front of him. No, that. Isaiah's eyes softened, but his voice stayed steady. Stand where you promised to stand. It was not surrender. It was fatherhood. That was the part the phone would never understand. Rebecca looked at Isaiah's wrapped thumb, the napkin stained red where he had cut himself, helping a server no one else had cared about. Then she looked at Lauren's father's phone. Something inside her resisted the neatness of his version. Stop recording, she said quietly. He blinked. Rebecca, this protects everyone. No, she said, still controlled, still not warm, but different. It protects the people who started watching in the middle. Lauren's father lowered the phone only halfway. The venue director shifted, irritated. A small crowd had gathered near the ballroom doors, their faces bright with curiosity and discomfort. Isaiah did not look at them. He looked at Caleb. Go back in, he said. Your mother and I will handle what belongs to us. The phrase struck Rebecca harder than an accusation. What belongs to us? Not what she owed him. Not what he could finally prove. Us. Before anyone could answer, a chime sounded from the venue director's tablet. He glanced down, frowned, and turned the screen away too fast. Rebecca noticed. Caleb noticed. Isaiah noticed because he always noticed small movements in tense rooms. What is it? Rebecca asked. Nothing important, the director said. But the tablet reflected in the glass wall behind him, and Caleb saw the paused security feed from the gift table. A second camera angle. One that showed Lauren's father watching Isaiah before the accusation was ever made. Caleb saw the reflection in the glass and reached for the venue director's tablet, but Isaiah moved first. Not fast, not dramatic, just one calm hand settling over his son's wrist before anger could become memory. Not here, Isaiah said. Caleb stared at him. Dad, that camera shows he was watching you before he accused you. Lauren's father stiffened, but only for a second. Men like him recovered quickly when rooms were expensive. That is a serious accusation, he said, and exactly why this should be handled privately. Rebecca looked from the tablet to Isaiah. The second camera angle was still paused in the glass, small and blue and damning, showing Lauren's father near the gift table long before the shout, his attention fixed on Isaiah's toolbox. It did not prove everything. Not yet, but it broke the clean story he had been selling. The crowd by the ballroom doors grew thicker. Someone whispered Caleb's name. Someone else asked whether the ceremony was delayed. Isaiah heard all of it. He heard the impatience beneath the concern, the appetite beneath the politeness. He looked at Caleb, then at Lauren, whose eyes were wet now, not from shame, but from the terror of watching her wedding become a battlefield between families. Isaiah had spent 26 years teaching his son that love was not just what a man claimed. It was what he protected when protecting it cost him something. So he lifted the toolbox by its old handle and stepped back from the tablet. Play it after the vows, he said. Caleb's mouth fell open. After? Yes. They're making you leave. Isaiah nodded once. Then I'll leave. The word struck Rebecca harder than they should have. Isaiah, that video may clear this up. He turned to her with the same quiet steadiness she had once mistaken for distance. And it may turn my son's wedding into a hearing. His voice softened, but did not bend. I won't give him that memory. Caleb's grip tightened around the folder. You're choosing to miss my vows to protect the man accusing you? Isaiah looked at Lauren's father only briefly. No, I'm choosing to protect you from becoming like him for one night. The hallway went still. Even Lauren's father had no clean answer for that. The venue director seized the silence and gestured toward the service exit with professional relief. Isaiah walked without being pulled. His cut thumb had bled through the napkin now, leaving a small dark mark on the toolbox handle. Caleb noticed it and almost followed, but Isaiah glanced back, a father's command without volume. Stand where joy is waiting. Caleb stopped. His eyes burned. Lauren slipped her hand into his, and for the first time that night, she did not look at Isaiah like an awkward relative from the wrong side of town. She looked at him like a man who had just paid a price no one in that hallway knew how to count. Rebecca followed him 3 steps toward the exit. "I can stop this," she said quietly. "I can ask for the footage. I can tell them to wait." Isaiah paused beneath the green glow of the service sign. Rain tapped against the metal door beyond him. "You can," he said, "but do it because truth matters, not because you feel sorry for me." The boundary was gentle. It still cut. Rebecca swallowed. Her hand moved toward her clutch, toward power, toward all the ways she knew how to repair things by command. Isaiah saw the movement and shook his head once. "Respect doesn't need a spotlight, Rebecca. It needs timing." Then he pushed open the service door and stepped into the rain with the toolbox at his side, missing the first words of his only son's vows so the room could stay beautiful a little longer. Rebecca stood frozen in the corridor until the officiant's voice rose from the ballroom. Caleb began to speak, and as his first vow trembled through the speakers, Rebecca looked down at the receipt still in her hand and finally saw the date printed beneath Isaiah's signature. It was the same day the hospital had told her an anonymous donor saved her treatment from being canceled. Rebecca did not move when the vow began. Caleb's voice filled the ballroom speakers, soft at first, then steadier, promising Lauren patience, loyalty, and a home where truth would never have to beg for space. Every word should have pulled Rebecca back toward her son. Instead, her eyes stayed on the date beneath Isaiah's signature. The same date. The same morning St. Mary's had called her room and said the treatment would continue after all. She had cried alone that day, thinking mercy had come from a hospital fund, from paperwork, from some faceless system finally working the way it was supposed to. Now the faceless system had Isaiah's handwriting. She stepped into the small office behind the bridal lounge and closed the door until the applause became a muffled pulse. The receipt lay on the desk under a lamp too bright for old secrets. Rebecca placed the hospital bracelet beside it, then Caleb's drawing, then the second receipt from the toolbox. A pattern began to form. Not proof enough for a courtroom. Too much truth for denial. Dates circled in blue ink. Payment confirmations. A hardship note. Do not disclose at payer's request. Her phone vibrated again. This time she answered. "Marla," she said, voice controlled. "I need you to access my old St. Mary's billing archive." Her assistant hesitated on the other end, confused by the request in the middle of a wedding. Rebecca did not explain. She gave her birth date, old address, the oncology account number from the receipt, and waited while the tiny office filled with the dry sound of Caleb's vows through the wall. Outside, Isaiah stood beneath the service awning in the rain, toolbox at his feet, his injured thumb pressed inside his pocket. He could hear his son say, "I promise to stay when staying is hard," and for the first time that night his eyes lowered. He had stayed in ways no one had seen. He had stayed in overtime shifts, in quiet bank transfers, in cheap dinners, in a truck that broke down every winter and kept moving anyway. A father's love did not always get a seat in the front row. Sometimes it stood under an exit sign, listening through a door. In the office, Marla came back on the line. "There are old payment records," she said carefully. "Some are archived under a private payer code. I can see the initials, but the final authorization page is restricted." Rebecca's hand tightened around the phone. "Initials. IB." The room seemed to shrink around her. Rebecca looked at Caleb's drawing again. "Dad says we don't let Mom fight dragons alone." "How many payments?" she asked. Marla paused. "More than one. I need access permission to pull the full ledger." Rebecca closed her eyes. More than one was enough to wound. Not enough to finish the truth. A knock came at the office door. The venue director entered before she answered, holding his tablet against his chest like a shield. "Mrs. Bennett, we need to resolve the situation with Mr. Bennett before guests start asking questions." Rebecca looked up. His tone was polite, but sweat shone at his temple. "Show me the second camera angle." He smiled too quickly. "That footage may not be available." May not. There was a system refresh. Rebecca stood. The old version of her, the one donors feared and board members obeyed, returned to her posture. But beneath it was something less polished. Fear, not a scandal, of being wrong too late. Do not delete anything, she said. The director's smile faded. Then Caleb appeared behind him, still holding Lauren's hand, his vows unfinished in his pocket, and his face changed by whatever he had overheard. Mom, he said, looking at the receipts spread across the desk, tell me that's not Dad's handwriting on all of them. Rebecca opened her mouth, but before she could answer, Marla's voice came through the phone, small and urgent. Rebecca, the restricted page just unlocked. There's a note from Mr. Bennett attached to the first payment. Rebecca almost asked Marla to read the note aloud. Almost. But the venue director moved between her and the phone with a panic that was too polished to look accidental. Mrs. Bennett, I must advise against opening private medical records in front of wedding guests, he said, glancing at Caleb, then at Lauren. There are liability concerns. Caleb's face hardened. My father is outside in the rain because people in this building decided liability mattered more than truth. Lauren squeezed his hand, but her eyes had gone to her father, who now stood in the doorway behind them, still holding his phone, no longer pretending he had not been listening. Caleb, he said, smooth and cold, I understand emotions are high, but your father brought confidential hospital documents into my daughter's wedding. That is not dignity. That is manipulation. The word landed like a slap. Rebecca heard it. Caleb heard it. Even Marla went silent on the line. Outside, beneath the service awning, Isaiah heard only the muffled shape of raised voices. He looked through the narrow window at the end of the hall and saw his son turn toward the door. That was enough. He picked up the toolbox, tucked it under his arm, and stepped farther from the entrance so Caleb would not have to choose in front of everyone. Rain ran down the back of his suit. His cut thumb throbbed inside the bloody napkin. In the bridal office, Rebecca looked at the receipts, the bracelet, the child's drawing, and the unlocked note waiting on the phone. Her whole life had trained her to verify before speaking. Boards, donors, doctors, lawyers, divorce papers. Never move until the evidence is clean. But the man in the rain had never waited for clean evidence before doing what was right. That realization came 1 second too late. Caleb was already walking past her. I'm going to get him. Lauren followed. Her father blocked the doorway. If you leave now, you make this the story of the night. Caleb looked at him with Isaiah's eyes. Maybe it already is. He pushed through. By the time Caleb reached the service exit, Isaiah had crossed the loading lane toward his old truck. The toolbox hung heavy at his side. The navy-wrapped wedding gift was tucked beneath his arm, damp at the corners. Dad, Caleb called. Isaiah stopped, but did not turn right away. The rain made everything silver and hard. Catering vans idled nearby. A dishwasher on a smoke break looked away, pretending not to witness a family breaking open beside the dumpsters. Caleb stepped into the rain. Come back inside. Isaiah turned then. His face was calm. That hurt Caleb more than if he had been angry. Your bride is waiting. I don't care about the ceremony right now. You will tomorrow. Caleb's voice cracked. They called you manipulative. Isaiah's jaw moved once. People call a man many things when they do not know what he carried. Then tell them. Isaiah looked at the ballroom windows glowing above them. No, Caleb stared at him. Why? Because the truth is not a weapon I hand my son on his wedding day. The sentence broke something small in Caleb's face. Behind them, Rebecca reached the service doorway, but did not step fully into the rain. She heard every word. She saw the gift under Isaiah's arm. She saw the toolbox, the bleeding thumb, the old truck waiting like a witness no one had respected. Isaiah walked to Caleb and placed the navy-wrapped gift in his hands. Give this to Lauren when the noise is gone. Caleb held it like it weighed more than paper and ribbon. Are you leaving? Isaiah's eyes softened. I'm giving you back your day. Then he handed Caleb the old child's drawing, folded carefully over the line about dragons. Caleb could not speak. Isaiah opened the truck door and set the toolbox on the passenger's seat. But before he could climb in, Rebecca's phone speaker crackled from the doorway. Marla's voice came through, small, shaken, and too late. Rebecca, the note says, please keep my name off her account. She needs treatment more than she needs pride, and my son still needs his mother. Isaiah closed his eyes in the rain. Caleb turned toward his mother. Rebecca stood frozen under the service light as the final piece of the truth arrived after the man who had carried it was already leaving. Rebecca did not cry when Marla read Isaiah's note. She did something harder. She stepped out from beneath the service light, into the rain, and walked toward the old black truck with the phone still open in her hand. Isaiah had one foot inside the cab. The toolbox rested on the passenger seat, its scratched St. Mary's logo catching the gray glow from the loading dock. Caleb stood between them with a navy-wrapped gift against his chest, too hurt to speak. "Isaiah," Rebecca said. He stopped, but he did not turn quickly. Men who have been misunderstood all night learn not to move toward hope too fast. "The note unlocked," she said. Her voice stayed controlled, but every word cost her. "I heard it." Isaiah looked at her then, rain running from his brow to the collar of his frayed suit. "Then you heard enough to let the boy go back inside." Rebecca shook her head once. "No, I heard enough to stop letting everyone else decide what your silence means." He studied her, careful. "Rebecca, I know," she said. "You did not want this on a wedding day." She glanced at Caleb, then at the glowing ballroom windows above them. "But they turned your silence into suspicion. That part is mine to correct." Isaiah's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with fear for his son's peace. Truth can be heavy. Rebecca looked down at the receipt in her hand, the ink soft from rain. "So can being wrong." She walked back inside before he could answer. Caleb followed first, then Lauren. Isaiah stayed by the truck for one long breath, looking at the toolbox, the gift, the drawing folded in Caleb's hand, all the small things that had carried more love than words ever had. Then he closed the truck door and returned, not for vindication, but because his son was watching. The ballroom quieted when Rebecca stepped onto the edge of the dance floor. She did not take the microphone at first. She looked at Lauren's father, at the venue director, at the guests who had whispered politely while a man bled in a hallway. Then she lifted her phone. "Before this ceremony continues," she said, "I need to correct something publicly because it was allowed to become public." The room tightened. Lauren's father moved toward her. "Rebecca, this is unnecessary." She did not look at him. What was unnecessary was recording a private family moment after accusing Isaiah Bennett without the full truth. The silence changed shape. The venue director's face drained when she turned to him. "Play the second camera angle." He hesitated. Rebecca's voice dropped. "Now." The screen near the stage flickered from the wedding slideshow to the security feed. Grainy, blue-toned, merciless. It showed Isaiah setting down his gift. It showed the server struggling with the cart. It showed Isaiah helping her. It showed Lauren's father watching him before stepping forward with the accusation. Not proof of cruelty, proof of haste, proof of a judgment waiting for a reason. Rebecca did not humiliate him. She did not call him names. She simply let the footage finish. Then she held up the receipt. These documents were not stolen. They were not leverage. They were records of hospital payments made quietly for me during 3 years of treatment, payments made by the man many of us were prepared to remove from this room. A sound moved through the guests. Not applause. Not yet. Shame has its own weather. Caleb's eyes closed. Lauren covered her mouth. Isaiah stood near the service doorway, still damp, still silent, his injured hand tucked behind his back. Rebecca turned toward him. "You protected my treatment. You protected my pride. You protected our son from carrying the weight of it." Her voice broke only at the edge. "And tonight, I protected appearances too long." Isaiah did not smile. He did not step forward like a man collecting repayment. He only looked at Caleb. That was where his heart went first. Rebecca walked to the service doorway and placed the hospital bracelet and folded drawing back into Isaiah's toolbox. "This belongs with the truth," she said softly. Isaiah looked at the drawing, then at her. "Truth being told does not make it easy." "I know," she whispered. Caleb stepped between them, holding the navy-wrapped gift. "Dad," he said, "can you come here the rest of my vows?" Isaiah's eyes moved from his son to Rebecca, who stood waiting for an answer she had no right to demand. After a long silence, he took the gift from Caleb's hands and said, "I can stand in the room. Forgiveness may need somewhere quieter." Isaiah did not walk to the front row. Not at first. He stood just inside the ballroom doors with rain still darkening his shoulders, the navy-wrapped gift held carefully in both hands, and the old toolbox resting near his worn shoes like something that had survived the storm with him. No one asked him to move. No one whispered now. The room had changed, but not into comfort. It had changed into awareness, and awareness was often quieter than shame. Caleb looked at his father from the altar, his eyes still red, his vows folded open in one shaking hand. Lauren stood beside him, no longer trying to keep the wedding perfect, only trying to keep the man she loved steady. Rebecca remained near the service doorway, one hand resting on the toolbox lid after placing the hospital bracelet and Childs drawing back inside. She did not reach for Isaiah. She did not ask for forgiveness the room had no right to witness. She simply stepped aside so he could see his son. That small movement said more than all the polished speeches she had ever given. The officiant waited. Caleb swallowed, looked down at the paper, then folded it closed. "I wrote a lot," he said, and a soft ripple of nervous laughter moved through the guests. "But I think I only need one promise now." Isaiah's face stayed calm, but his fingers tightened slightly around the gift. Caleb turned to Lauren. "I promise I will not make you beg to be believed. I promise when the truth is quiet, I will still look for it. And I promise that if we ever have a child, they will know love is not only what we say in front of people. It is what we carry when nobody claps." Lauren cried then, but gently, without performance. Rebecca lowered her eyes. Isaiah looked at the floor for one breath, the way he did when emotion came too close to his throat. The ceremony continued. Rings, promises, a kiss that did not erase the night, but gave it somewhere softer to land. Applause rose slowly, then fuller, yet Isaiah did not lift his hands right away. He watched Caleb smile at his bride and allowed himself the smallest exhale. Only then did he clap, quietly, like a man grateful not to be the center of the story anymore. Later, after the first dance, after Lauren's father had left the ballroom early with his pride folded tighter than his handkerchief, Caleb found Isaiah near the gift table. The toolbox was closed. The navy-wrapped gift sat on top of it, the paper damp at one corner. "Can we open it?" Caleb asked. Isaiah looked at Lauren first. "It belongs to both of you." Caleb untied the ribbon with the care of a boy opening something breakable. Inside was not money, not jewelry, not a grand gesture meant to compete with wealthy guests. It was a framed photograph of the old black truck, restored from years ago, with Caleb at 7 sitting on the hood in a crooked church shirt, holding the same drawing of 3 stick figures beneath a yellow sun. Behind the frame was a small envelope. Caleb opened it and found a note in Isaiah's plain handwriting. "Build a home where no one has to hide their kindness to protect someone else's pride." Caleb pressed the paper to his mouth. Lauren leaned into his shoulder. Rebecca stood a few feet away, still elegant, still guarded in the bones, but no longer distant. "He kept everything," she said softly. Isaiah glanced at the toolbox. Not everything, just what mattered. For the first time that night, Rebecca did not answer quickly. She let silence do what control never had. Then she said, "I spent years thinking strength meant needing no one." Isaiah looked at her, not coldly, not warmly enough to make it easy. Sometimes strength is letting the right people help and not punishing them for seeing you hurting. The words were gentle. They still found the bruise. Rebecca nodded once. Not absolution. Acceptance of the lesson. Outside, the rain had stopped. The lakefront windows reflected chandeliers, flowers, and the old black truck parked beyond the service lane, no longer hidden among catering vans, but still exactly what it was. Worn, useful, faithful. Caleb walked his father to the front table before dinner was served. No announcement, no dramatique paligi. Just a son pulling out a chair and a father sitting down where he should have been all along. Rebecca watched from across the table as Isaiah placed his wrapped thumb beside his coffee cup, black and steaming now instead of cold. The hospital bracelet rested inside the toolbox under the gift table. No longer evidence, no longer a secret, only a reminder that some love does its work without witnesses. And when Caleb looked at his father through the soft noise of the reception, he finally understood the man Isaiah had always been. He did not raise his voice. He raised a son, protected a woman's life, and left behind a faith in people that no accusation could bury.